In 1957, when the first Sputnik cut through Earth's atmosphere, humanity looked to the sky with renewed wonder. The space race between Americans and Soviets wasn't just a contest for technological supremacy, but a search for the unknown that exists beyond our atmosphere. Among NASA scientists, Elena Kowalski stood out for her almost supernatural intuition. While everyone calculated trajectories based on a spherical Earth, small anomalies in the data that only she noticed began to awaken a disturbing doubt. What if everything we believed about our planet was an elaborate illusion? Chapter 1. Orbital Anomalies. Houston, 1963. The clock marked 2:37 a.m. at the Space Center. Elena Kowalski stared at the equations on the blackboard, deep, dark circles under her eyes evidencing sleepless nights. At 32, she was the only woman among NASA physicists, tolerated for her brilliance but rarely heard. Still here, Robert Chen, a 45-year-old Taiwanese physicist, placed a coffee next to Elena's notes. "The trajectories don't close," she murmured. "We're compensating the calculations without understanding why." "We've reviewed this hundreds of times," Robert sighed. "The adjustments are normal." "Not of this magnitude." Elena pointed to sequences of numbers circled in red. "The probes should lose contact at specific points if we were orbiting a sphere, but the communication patterns follow a different logic." Elena opened a drawer and removed a confidential dossier. "I compared with Soviet missions. Their signal loss patterns are identical to ours at the same orbital points." "How did you get that data?" "I have my methods. The important thing is that two independent technologies encounter the same anomalies. I think we're detecting a barrier." That afternoon, Director Franklin called an extraordinary meeting. Elena sat at the back of the room, ignored by colleagues. "Gentlemen," Franklin began, distributing ultra-secret folders. "And lady, what you're about to see doesn't leave this room." Elena opened the folder. On the first page, a photograph showed deep space with an anomalous object. The Ranger 5 probe captured this image before losing communication, Franklin explained. It recorded what appears to be a reflective structure in deep space. The structure had geometric shapes too precise to be natural, interconnected hexagonal patterns. "Camera defect?" asked Dr. Harriman. "We analyzed it with 3 different instruments. All detected the anomaly." "Ice crystals?" suggested another scientist. "The material doesn't correspond to anything known." Elena raised her hand. "Director, the points where the structure was detected correspond to the anomaly points I've identified in the last 6 missions." "Send your analyses to my office," Franklin replied. "Washington is extremely interested in this discovery." At 11:15 p.m., in Elena's apartment, the living room was transformed into an improvised laboratory. Windows covered with aluminum foil, smuggled equipment on the table. "This is madness," said Robert. "We'll be arrested for espionage." "If we don't do this, something much bigger will be compromised," Elena replied, analyzing the raw data from the probe she had intercepted. After 3 hours, the oscilloscope showed waves forming a clear structure, radiation data and magnetic interference revealing more than the simple photograph. "A gigantic curved surface," Elena murmured. "It's not Earth's curvature, but something larger that seems to envelop it." "A dome," Robert pronounced. "My God, that would mean that everything we know about our place in the universe might be an illusion," Elena completed. or a prison. At 4:12 a.m., they concluded their calculations. Elena stored her discoveries under the floorboards. Earth cannot be a sphere in a vacuum. Not with these patterns. We're detecting the limits of something that contains us. Who would build this? The Soviets. Nothing human would be capable. We're talking about something extraterrestrial, or even more incomprehensible. As the sun rose, Elena contemplated the sky through the window. Humanity's deepest mystery was just beginning to reveal itself, and she found herself at the center of it, a marginalized scientist about to question everything science knew about our place in the cosmos. Chapter 2: Conspiracy of Silence. Moscow, 1965. The Russian winter penetrated to the bone. Elena rubbed her gloved hands while observing the address scribbled on the crumpled paper. The small apartment was on the 4th floor of a gray Stalin-era building in the Arbat district. The woman who received her at the door checked the empty corridor before admitting her. "He is waiting," she whispered in Russian, leading Elena through a modest living room. Mikhail Baranov, chief scientist of the Soviet space program, looked older than his 54 years, tall and thin, with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. He dismissed the woman with a gesture, locked the door, and checked the curtains twice. "Dr. Kowalski," he spoke in fluent English, "you risked much coming here." "Less than you receiving me," Elena replied, removing documents from her coat. The apartment was sparsely furnished, but the walls were covered with scientific books. A radio played Tchaikovsky at high volume, against eavesdropping, Elena presumed. "Your contacts at the Polish embassy are interesting," commented Baranov, serving vodka in 2 glasses. "My grandmother was born in Krakow," Elena smiled. "Family ties sometimes overcome political borders." Baranov didn't smile back. "What is so important for an American scientist to visit Moscow during our worst winter?" Elena spread her calculations and photographs on the table. "This." The Soviet scientist studied the documents for long minutes, his face growing progressively paler. His trembling hands reached for a drawer, from which he withdrew a folder with the Soviet space program seal. Inside, photographs and graphs disturbingly similar to Elena's. "Your numbers are precise," confirmed Baranov, looking nervously out the window. "We discovered similar anomalies on Vostok 3. We detected reflections that shouldn't exist, as if the universe were a mirror." "They're hiding this too?" Elena asked. "By direct order from Brezhnev, just as your superiors are, by order of Kennedy before he died, and now Johnson. Why hide this? It's the greatest scientific discovery in history." "It's the greatest threat to the established order," corrected Baranov. "Imagine telling humanity that we live in something like a cage." "But who would build this and why?" Baranov drank his vodka in 1 gulp. "My colleague Yuri Petrov theorized that we are an experiment." He disappeared the following week. Elena slid an envelope across the table. "We need to join forces, Mikhail. This is the real race, not to reach the moon, but to discover what's beyond the dome." "Dome?" Baranov turned pale. "It's the only explanation for the reflection patterns, for the way we lose communication with spacecraft at specific points. We live under something that separates us from true space. The KGB is monitoring all astronomers and physicists," warned Baranov. "There are rumors that the CIA does the same." I need access to Soviet data from undisclosed lunar missions, insisted Elena, especially radiation readings from the dark side of the moon. Baranov hesitated, then nodded. I have a contact in Baikonur. He can provide this, but it will take time. They arranged a code for future correspondence, references to a fictional study on Arctic bird migration, with coordinates hidden among the data. If what we suspect is true, who is watching us? Asked Elena. The most frightening question, replied Baranov, is whether they know we've discovered them. 2 days later, Baranov's apartment was found empty, no body, no explanation. Elena learned through her contact at the Polish embassy. The message was clear. Some truths were too dangerous. Back in the US, Elena returned to her routine at NASA, now observing the corridors of power with new eyes. Who else knew? Who was actively covering up the truth? Robert waited in her laboratory, anxious for news. Baranov confirmed everything, whispered Elena, and then disappeared. My God, Robert turned pale. We need to stop. This is bigger than us. We need protection, corrected Elena. Distributed knowledge that cannot be easily silenced. In the following weeks, Elena identified marginalized scientists like them. Brilliant minds ignored by the establishment for political, gender, or racial reasons. Sarah Jenkins, a black astrophysicist relegated to administrative tasks despite her Harvard doctorate. Carlos Mendoza, a Mexican engineer whose innovations in telecommunications were routinely attributed to his superiors. David Goldstein, a Jewish mathematician whose theories on non-Euclidean geometry were considered too eccentric. They met secretly in the abandoned astrophysics laboratory in the basement of NASA's Building C, forgotten after budget cuts. Call us crazy, but you cannot ignore verifiable data, Elena declared to the small group. They called themselves observers, a clandestine network of scientists committed to a forbidden truth. Secretly, they began modifying instruments on future space missions to collect data that no one else was looking for. Elena installed a coded radio in her basement to contact Yuri, Baranov's assistant in Baikonur. The Soviet transmissions confirmed her fears. The Russian space program had also detected the barrier and was conducting similar tests. The KGB interrogated all of Baranov's colleagues, reported Yuri, but he left hidden data for you. The coordinates led Elena to a post office box in East Berlin, where an anonymous package contained microfilms of Baranov's final experiments. His final conclusion was handwritten. Not only are we trapped, we are being observed. In her apartment, Elena developed a mathematical code to hide her discoveries in legitimate scientific articles about lunar orbits. The observers published regularly, each article containing fragments of a larger puzzle that only they knew how to interpret. At night, alone, Elena looked at the stars and wondered, if the universe we saw was a projection on a dome, what existed beyond? And why would someone or something create such an elaborate illusion? The answer, she suspected, was in the only direction no one had thought to look. Downward, not upward. If we lived on a plane covered by a dome and not on a sphere, then Earth had an underside that we never explored. And perhaps the key to our cosmic prison was exactly there. Chapter 3. The Looking Glass Project. White Sands Underground Base, 1968. The abandoned Cold War bunker, 30 meters below the New Mexico desert, had transformed into the observers' headquarters. Equipment smuggled from various NASA laboratories occupied the improvised tables while maps and diagrams covered the concrete walls. Elena contemplated the three-dimensional model they had built, a representation of her theory about Earth's true nature, a circular flat structure covered by a hemispherical dome. "We need to look downward, not upward," she explained to the gathered observers. "If we're on a plane and not a sphere, Earth has an underside that we've never explored." The 12 scientists present, physicists, astronomers, engineers, represented what Elena called the Invisible Academy, extraordinary talents marginalized by the scientific establishment. "How do we penetrate something that could be kilometers thick?" questioned Sarah Jenkins, an astrophysicist who had developed theories about black holes ignored by her superiors at Princeton. Robert adjusted his glasses, leaning over the device that occupied the center of the room. With this, the apparatus, the size of a typewriter, looked like a combination of radar, seismograph, and radio transmitter. Its core contained a prototype piezoelectric crystal secretly developed by Carlos Mendoza. "A deep soil penetrator?" asked David Goldstein, a mathematician whose algorithms had been fundamental to deciphering the orbital anomalies. "More than that," replied Elena. "It's a concentrated gravitational wave emitter. In theory, it can send pulses that pass through solid matter and return with data about its composition." "But we would need a distant observation point," noted Sarah. "Earth is too big to analyze while standing on it." Elena smiled. "That's why we need the moon." Robert unrolled the detailed schematics of the device. "I gained access to the Apollo mission components depot. No one will notice extra parts when they're assembling the lunar instruments." "I secured access to the Apollo mission," informed Sandra Weiss, an engineer infiltrated in mission control, her face tense under carefully combed blonde hair. "When the crew installs the lunar seismographs, our device will be among them." "How?" asked Sarah. "NASA catalogs every gram of equipment. The Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package already contains seismographs," explained Sandra. "Our device is disguised as a calibration component, official, registered, but with undocumented capabilities." The plan was ingenious and dangerous. Use the moon as a platform to send penetrating waves toward Earth, mapping its true structure. "If we detect a solid surface at a uniform depth," continued Elena, "we'll have our proof. No naturally spherical planet has a flat bottom." "And if we're discovered?" asked David, concern evident on his face. Elena had no comforting answer. Baranov had disappeared. 2 Japanese scientists who had detected similar anomalies died in a laboratory accident. In the safe apartment in Houston, Elena studied photographs of Earth taken by the Gemini 11 astronauts. What others saw as definitive proof of the planet's sphericity, she analyzed with new eyes. Enlarging the edges of Earth's curvature and applying spectral filters, Elena identified a refraction pattern at the planet's edges, a subtle but undeniable optical phenomenon that precisely followed her equations for a flat world under a hemispherical dome. "The refraction is wrong," she murmured to Robert, who was typing codes on an improvised computer. "Light curves inconsistently with an atmosphere on a spherical planet." Robert paused, removing his glasses. "Elena, what if we're not just trapped? What if we're being observed?" The thought had tormented Elena for months. The characteristics of the dome, the detected geometric patterns, suggested intentional design, not a natural phenomenon. "We're not just prisoners," she concluded, the horror of the realization etched on her face. We're an experiment. That night, in a moment of desperate audacity, Elena modified the programming of the looking glass device. In addition to mapping Earth's structure, it would send a message, simple but revolutionary. In the depths of dawn, she encrypted a sequence to be transmitted through the lunar device. Hello from inside. A greeting from within, a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean, a declaration. We are here, we know we're trapped, we want contact. This is madness, warned Robert. If something really keeps us here, you're alerting our jailers. Or begging for our liberators, replied Elena. We don't know who's on the other side. No one expected a response. The week of the Apollo mission brought unbearable tension. Elena watched from a secondary monitor in mission control, her limited access guaranteed by Sandra. Each phase of the launch, each maneuver, carried not just America's hopes in the space race, but the future of the Looking Glass project. As the lunar module landed, Elena held the small backup transmitter, a device to remotely activate the Looking Glass if the automatic programming failed. When the astronauts began installing the experiments on the lunar surface, Sandra confirmed with an imperceptible nod. The device was working. During the following hours, data began to flow silently to a secret terminal in the White Sands bunker where David and Sarah monitored the results. Elena's phone rang at 3:14 a.m. It's working. Sarah's voice trembled. The waves. They detected something. A solid bottom, Elena. Approximately 4,000 kilometers below Earth's surface. Elena closed her eyes, a mixture of vindication and terror taking over. Her entire scientific life, dedicated to understanding the cosmos, had been based on false premises. There's more, continued Sarah. The reflection pattern, it's artificial, geometrically perfect, like a built structure. The implications were overwhelming. Humanity didn't inhabit a spherical planet in a vast universe, but a planar construction covered by a cosmic illusion, a manufactured reality. Was the message sent? Asked Elena. Sarah's silence answered before her words. It was, and Elena, we're receiving something back. Chapter 4. The Echo from the Abyss is. Tranquility Lunar Base, 1969. Houston, we're receiving something unusual. The astronaut's voice crackled over the radio, distorted by distance, but the apprehension was clear even through the static. Elena infiltrated into mission control as a special consultant after weeks of bureaucratic manipulation held her breath. Around her, NASA technicians and engineers worked feverishly, unaware of the true significance of that moment. Can you specify tranquility? The Capcom responded officially, confirming anomalous readings. It seems like an echo. In the small reserved room where Elena monitored secondary data, away from the main gaze, the blood drained from her face. The waves sent to map Earth's structure had not only confirmed a solid bottom approximately 4,000 kilometers below the surface we knew, but had also returned something else, a response. Sandra, I need the raw readings, Elena whispered into the hidden communicator. Impossible right now, came Sandra Weiss's tense response, positioned among the main engineers. Franklin is in the room. He's paying too much attention to this anomaly. Elena felt a chill. Director Franklin rarely personally supervised the technical aspects of missions. His presence confirmed her suspicions. Some in the high ranks knew more than they admitted. Hours later, when the work shift ended and mission control was quieter, Sandra slid a microfilm to Elena during an apparently casual passage through the corridor. "Be careful," murmured Sandra. "We're being watched, and not just from the outside." In the observer's safe apartment, Robert connected the projector while Elena, Sarah, and David anxiously waited. The looking glass readings began to appear on the wall. Not just data about Earth's structure, but something unexpected. "This isn't a random echo," murmured Sarah, adjusting her glasses. "It's a mathematical sequence." David, the code genius, immediately began transcribing the numbers, his face growing progressively paler. "Elena, this is a deliberate response." The message was simple: precise coordinates in the Arctic and a repeated sequence that the computers took hours to decipher. Access point delta. "Someone or something received our message and responded," whispered Robert, the disbelief in his voice. "Not just responded," corrected Elena, checking the coordinates on a global atlas. "Gave us an address." The location pointed to a remote region in the Arctic, near the magnetic North Pole. An area practically inaccessible, covered by perennial ice and ignored by scientific expeditions. "Could be a trap," warned Robert. "Or worse, we're being manipulated by who keeps us prisoners." Elena contemplated the map, her fingers tracing the route to the coordinates. "Or it's our ticket out." 3 days later, a small, unofficial expedition set off for the indicated coordinates. The hydroplane modified for ice landing, borrowed from a climate research station thanks to Carlos Mendoza's contacts, transported Elena, Robert, and 2 ex-military observers, James Dixon, ex-SEAL, and Marcus Thompson, Air Force communications specialist, dishonorably discharged after questioning orders on a secret mission. The 8-hour flight over the Arctic was tense and silent. The external temperature of -40 degrees Celsius was a constant reminder of the danger they faced. "Arriving at coordinates," announced the pilot, a taciturn Norwegian paid generously not to ask questions. Below them, apparently nothing but ice. No structure, no sign of civilization, just the infinite white of the Arctic landscape. "Are you sure about the coordinates?" questioned Thompson, checking the primitive GPS equipment. "Absolutely," replied Elena. "We need to land and investigate." The landing was tense, the plane sliding over the irregular surface. Equipped with thermal suits, the 4 explorers went out into the cutting cold. "Begin scanning," Elena directed, activating a magnetic anomaly detector developed by Sarah. For almost 2 hours, they walked in a spiral from the landing point. The howling wind and limited visibility made the operation difficult. "Nothing," Thompson shouted against the wind. "If there's something here, it's well hidden." That was when Elena's instruments went crazy. The magnetic anomaly detector began to pulse frantically, its needle oscillating in impossible patterns. "Here!" she shouted, kneeling in the snow. "Help me dig!" The shovels cut through the ice with difficulty, 20 centimeters, 50, 1 meter. With each layer, the detector pulsed stronger. At 2 meters deep, the shovels hit something metallic. It wasn't rock, nor a natural formation. The sound was unmistakable. Metal against metal. Working feverishly, they removed more snow and ice, revealing a polished, dark gray surface with strange geometric patterns engraved that emitted a soft, bluish glow. "My God," murmured Robert, "it's artificial." The metallic structure, buried under millennia-old layers of ice, wasn't natural. Its surface, despite the time in ice, was immaculate, without corrosion, without degradation. Dixon, the ex-SEAL, carefully examined the engraved patterns. "This looks like a door or hatch." Elena ran her trembling fingers over the geometric symbols. They were identical to the patterns detected by the looking glass, to the anomalies she had observed in the space probe photos. "They're the same symbols," she whispered, "the same language." Robert documented everything with a camera, his face tense with admiration and terror. "Elena, this is pre-human or non-human." Carefully, Elena pressed a sequence of symbols that, according to her calculations, should mean open or enter. To her amazement, the surface responded. The patterns lit up in more intense blue, and a slight tremor ran through the structure. With a soft hydraulic sound impossible for technology buried for millennia, a circular section of the structure receded and slid to the side. When they opened it completely, they didn't find the vacuum of outer space, as some feared, but a corridor illuminated by pulsating blue lights that seemed to extend infinitely downward. The air that came out was surprisingly warm and breathable, with a slight metallic odor. On the corridor wall, inscriptions in the same geometric language that Elena immediately recognized from the anomalies she had studied for years. A control panel with luminous symbols pulsed softly. Robert, who had worked tirelessly on the translation algorithm based on the looking glass data, examined the first symbol repeated several times on the panel. "Exit," he translated hesitantly, his voice almost failing. "Emergency exit." The meaning was clear and terrifying. They hadn't found an entrance to something. They had found an exit, a door out of the reality they knew. "Let's go down," decided Elena, her heart pounding in her chest. "Elena, we don't know what's down there," warned Thompson. "This violates all security protocol." "We passed security a long time ago," she replied, adjusting her flashlight. "We came this far to discover the truth. It's just below." The metallic corridor descended in a gentle spiral for approximately 200 meters. The blue lights turned on automatically as they advanced, as if the system knew of their presence. There was no dust, no signs of deterioration, just a silent technology that seemed to have waited for visitors for millennia. At the end of the corridor, they found a circular room with a large window of transparent material that looked like crystal, but stronger than any known material. And through that window, they saw the unthinkable, a vast space, not the cosmos as they knew it, but something infinitely stranger, a plane that stretched to the horizon, where dozens of structures similar to Earth, flat, covered by domes, aligned in precise patterns. Each dome contained what appeared to be a different world, some with reddish atmospheres, others bluish, some with multiple artificial suns. "It's a facility," whispered Robert, his voice barely audible. "We're in a farm of worlds." Elena felt her legs weaken as she frantically photographed the impossible vision. As she approached the window more, she noticed something that made her freeze. A gigantic silhouette moving between the distant domes, a humanoid but clearly non-human figure, manipulating controls on another dome. Before she could fully process what she was seeing, alarms began to sound. Red lights pulsed in the corridor they had come from. "We need to get out of here," shouted Dixon, grabbing Elena's arm. "Now!" The ascent was chaotic. As they ran back through the corridor, Elena felt a massive presence behind them. Not steps, but the unmistakable sensation of something conscious approaching, something aware of their presence. Upon reaching the surface, Dixon and Thompson sealed the hatch again, erasing the symbols as Elena had instructed. The return to the plane was a race against time and cold, now exponentially more threatening. Only upon takeoff did Elena realize they weren't alone. Two black helicopters without identification were approaching the area they had just left. "They know," murmured Robert, his face gray with shock as the plane gained altitude. They always knew. Conclusion: The World Beyond. Special Containment Laboratory, Undisclosed Location, 1970. "What did you see out there?" asked Director Franklin, now revealed as a member of a government agency, much older and more secretive than NASA. Elena, kept under observation since returning from the Arctic expedition, smiled without humor. "It's not out there, it's outside the experiment." The photographs spread on the table showed the impossible. Images captured by Elena before being recaptured by the security forces that followed them. They showed a vast plain where several structures similar to Earth, flat, covered by domes, extended to the horizon, each with different configurations, different stages of development. "We are a simulation," she concluded, "one among hundreds. A controlled reality experiment conducted by entities we can barely comprehend." Franklin slid a document across the table. "You have a choice, Doctor. Kowalski, join the administration project. Yes, we've known about them for generations. Or face memory erasure and reintegration." "What's the purpose?" she asked. "Why keep billions of human beings on an artificial Earth?" "Directed evolution," replied Franklin. "Each dome is a different evolutionary line. Some are in their ice ages, others in futures you wouldn't recognize. We are Earth 459, the line closest to achieving the cognitive potential necessary for the next phase." In the laboratory window, Elena observed the night sky, the stars now recognizable as mere projections on a perfectly designed technological dome. For an instant, she glimpsed a gigantic shadow passing overhead, a humanoid silhouette observing the experiment. "What if I choose a third option?" she asked. "What if I tell everyone the truth?" Franklin smiled sadly. "You wouldn't be the first. Why do you think flat Earth movements exist? All are distorted echoes of people who discovered fragments of the truth over the centuries. The human mind transforms incomprehensible reality into mythology." Elena closed her eyes, finally understanding. "We weren't prisoners of a human conspiracy, but participants in something much larger, a vast garden of conscious evolution, cultivated by cosmic gardeners who patiently observed our flourishing. Earth wasn't round or flat, it was a laboratory. And now she had to decide, become a laboratory assistant or remain as one of the specimens. Her choice would determine not just her fate, but potentially the evolutionary course of all Earth 459. End